all the old Civics, Integras and CRXs are great and enjoyable cars, but nobody would give such an attention would Honda not produce such a gem of an engine as the B series. With the Japanese precision and quality, it was able to produce an incredible power per liter and match even bigger engines of European and American brands. This is a story of the B16 and B18. Honda is one of the younger companies founded just after World War II in 1948. They started making automobiles yet in the 1960s, with knowledge acquired thanks to motorcycle production since the 1950s. The very first automobile engine series was actually loosely based on a motorcycle engine made up until the late 1980s. Many of their first cars were actually sports cars, having tiny but very cool engines with 2 or 4 cylinders. Starting with an economy unit, the Japanese launched their all-new D series in 1986. It was meant for the general public that required reliable yet fuel-efficient vehicles for daily commuting. A lightweight aluminum engine that was easy to maintain. While many automakers would be happy with the success of a new model portfolio, for Honda it was just a half of the plan, hiding something special in their sleeve for enthusiasts. Introduced in 1989, a brand new engine was shown to the public, having as much as 1.6 liters of displacement, with 100 horsepower per liter power density. It was unheard of at the time without forced induction. The special trickery was a thing more commonly known as the VTEC, the variable valve timing and lift electronic control. Previously, it could have been seen on a Honda CBR 400, where the system activated other 2 valves in the upper rev range. But the automobile VTEC worked differently and put these new engines to a completely new level. Honda had a plenty of experience with high-revving engines. Not only is its history full of various sporty motorcycles, the first automobiles by Honda are renowned to be RPM hungry, such as a Honda N360, Honda S500, S600, or even a 70 horsepower Honda S800 revving to 10,000 RPM. See, it was not an issue to make a power-dense engine, the trick was to make it daily drivable, with a usable low RPM power band. The development started yet in 1983, experimenting with variable valve control. The goal was to create an engine that would benefit in low revs from a small lobe cam, and at the same time from the aggressive lift in the upper RPM. An electronically and mechanically operated system with the help of oil pressure. Once all the factors were in favor of the engagement, such as temperature and RPM, the system would switch over to a middle cam profile, which increased valve lift, allowing more air to enter cylinders. With over 15 million VTEC equipped engines ever made, there has never been a single problem or warranty claim of the VTEC system itself. At low revs, the engine would work very efficiently and quietly, while after the switch over RPM, the VTEC squeezed all the power it could from the tiny motor. This is one of the key aspects which ensured the success of the Honda B series. Not all of them did have the VTEC, but the ones you would want big do. This is what the original 1.6 liter benefits from. When the engine crosses a 5500 RPM mark, the VTEC turns on, the engine sound deepens, and the power delivery does not weaken until 8000 RPM. The base consists of a cast aluminum block with iron sleeves and a great flowing head with the new variable valve lift system. Compared to the newer K series, it is more right placed in an engine bay using a timing belt for the valve train and the intake at the firewall side. The very first unit, the B16A, was placed into a Civic and CRX SIR and Integra XSI, paired to a gearbox with an optional limited slip diff. This is where the fame of Honda's hatchback started. At a first glance relatively normal, but on the inside very potent, bulletproof, and incredibly hungry for revs. Who would not appreciate nearly 9000 RPM to play with in a lightweight package? Honda created a truly iconic engine that after over 3 decades doesn't weaken in popularity. Several versions of the B16A were developed, marked with a number after the A, such as the A1, A2, up to A6. There were minor differences, but they all had a short deck block of 203.9mm with 134mm connecting rods, as did a single 1.7 litre B engine only sold as an export in the USA. Power output varied between 150 to 170 horsepower, however with the right mods, the B16A can crank up to 200 horsepower, possibly over 220 horsepower if the budget is not tight. In addition, forced induction is well received by the B16, as its internals can handle about 300 horsepower. Similar but yet very different 1.6 litre is the B16B, which was only placed into an EK9 Civic Type R. It has got the same 81 by 77.4mm cylinders, but it uses a taller block used in a B18, which we will talk about in a minute. This block is 212mm long and accommodates the same crankshaft with longer conrods of 142.42mm, featuring a 6100 VTEC trigger RPM, a lighter and slimmer stem intake valves, and 42-degree valve seats rather than 60. It breathes a lot better in the upper part of the RPM gauge. There are also 10.821 pistons with a longer crown and bigger bulge. In the end, all the internals were different. The camshaft, while low, was more aggressive. The intake side has been revamped and the intake ports were factory polished. One could see it as a day-stroke B18C engine that put down about the same crank horsepower as a middle power VTEC 1.8 litre. Its low and mid-range were nearly identical to the B16A, and with the right parts, it is possible to achieve the extra 25 horsepower out of it. By the way, Spoon once did a crazy 10k build of the B16B engine. There are several variations of the B18 with 2 different stroke crankshafts, though all of them feature the longer 212mm block. The non-VTEC B18A and B18B units did use a longer 89mm crankshaft, resulting in 1834cc of engine displacement, though it is the B18C which draws the most attention. The B18C, alongside its iterations up to the C7, accommodates an 87.2mm stroke crankshaft. Internals were all different with modified pistons, lighter conrods, all square toes, and wider intake valves from 31 to 33mm. While a regular B18 ends at about 6200 RPM, any B18C doesn't slow down until 8500, with a few running all the way up to the 9K. They varied in compression ratio and power output between 172 to nearly 200 horsepower, but the B18C only appeared in a Civic and Integra. A Type R variant received a 62mm throttle body, while the non-Type R had a small 60mm piece. Adding about 10 to 15 horsepower is a piece of cake on the B18C. Minor things like a better header and a 2.5-inch exhaust system can help. Additional things like a Skunk 2 intake, more aggressive cams, and a larger 65mm throttle body is able to squeeze as much as 210 horsepower on the crankshaft. Beyond that, you are looking at more internal upgrades, or a turbo with a power potential of 250 horsepower. About that, in the case of the turbo, it is recommended to upgrade the internals. There is one section of the Honda B series engine which does not get covered a lot, and that's a 2-liter. It is the largest B engine and was placed into larger models, mostly the CR-V. It never received a VTEC head, but it is possible to place one on the B20 and create an interesting hybrid engine. With a B16 or B18 VTEC head, it is easy to reach 200 horsepower figures, but that's about the limit of the bottom end, which does not like revs as much. With upgraded internals like an oil pump, high compression pistons, and oil squirters, a 250 horsepower output is achievable. Some more ponies are hidden in parts like Skunk 2, better exhaust and headwork, but nothing more than 300 horsepower without a turbo is possible. You will gain a lot of torque though, and that's probably the reason why to consider a B20 build. On the internet, you may come across a B20A engine series. This is a predecessor of the B series we are talking about, and many parts are completely different from them. There was even a 2.1 liter of the B20A, but none of them ever had the VTEC on them. Now, when we know what each of them consists of, a sensible question about which one is the best may come to many minds. Obviously, the B18C is capable of more power and torque at the same time, although the B16B may come close. However, where the B16 lags behind, catches up in a lower price. A 1.6 liter is simply less popular for its low potential, which is what you pay a premium for the 1.8 liter. It is always a good thing to consider what you are trying to build, and if you already have one, it may be a good idea to consider that one for a project. For a larger vehicle, a larger engine is an essential solution, and a B20 creation can be a cool project as well. Across the B series portfolio, one cannot go wrong as all of them are incredibly reliable and well built. There may be an oil consumption, but honestly, we are looking at a 34-year-old engine at most, and some issues will come just for the age. The B series was only placed into front-wheel drive platforms, so rear-wheel drive conversions are not as common, especially when the K series is around for quite some time and provides significantly more oomph in a larger displacement. However, whichever you choose, you are getting a solid engine that, especially with the VTEC, provides unprecedented performance, exceptional sound, and great drivability in a very lightweight body.